Have you ever studied hard to pass a test and then promptly forgot everything 5 minutes after the test was done? That's fauxchievement. Whenever someone focuses only on the rewards offered and not on getting the real benefits of participating in the activity, it's a form of fauxchievement. Fauxchievement can happen outside education too. Listen to this.
Hello everyone. This is Bill. I'm Malcolm. I'm always curious when I talk to people like you about whether you make the error of assuming that more of the world is amenable to technological fixes than is actually the case. So let me just give this one example with digital health records. So when I talk to friends of mine who are doctors and who use these things, they say, here's the problem. You're the patient, I'm the doctor. Before the digital health record, I'm talking to you, listening to you, emoting, holding your hand, whatever. Then I would have, if it was 1970, I would talk into a dictaphone and my secretary would transcribe it, and that would be the, right? Now they say, what you're doing is you're on the keyboard and you're not looking at the patient, and the patient gets really upset. And what you've done is you have, in the cause of efficiency, disrupted the very thing the patient really wants in the encounter, which is a personal connection with the provider. Now, is it possible that this is simply an area of deeply important personal interaction that is not amenable to technological, in this specific area, amenable to technological?
I'd like to believe those things aren't at odds with one another. In other words, if you can make the bureaucratic piece melt away, you could increase the kind of intimate piece of it all. And the real problem is, and I don't think entrepreneurs realize this, but there's an assumption of market forces when you do a startup. Like, you expect customers to pay for value and to not pay for bad things and to want to be more efficient. And the physics are just completely mucked up in the healthcare system. It's like those drawings where you can't tell which way is up. It's everywhere you turn, it's like that. So I bet most people don't know this, even though if you do a Google search, you'll see that it's absolutely true. So in 2009, when the government passed the Reinvestment Act to try and get America going, or whatever it was called, they put in place a program where a doctor is paid, believe this or not, paid $44,000 to implement EHR, electronic health records. So it'd basically be like telling a construction company, if you put in NetSuite, you get paid 50 grand. And it's just shocking to me. So the payments for these incentive programs, because I just looked it up to get the recent update, $29 billion. So our government's paid $29 billion for doctors to implement software that they weren't naturally implementing on their own. And of course, your question that comes to your mind is, well, will they use it, or are they just saying they're going to use it to get paid?
Or is it any good?
Yes, so two things about that. Putting it in was meaningful use 1, that's 44K. Because they're not sure you'll use it, meaningful use 2 is proving that you're using the software you put in place in meaningful use 1, and that's another $17,000 for the doctor. And it's insane, it's asinine. And if you go online and do searches for meaningful use, you'll find spreadsheets where they list the features required to be in a qualified EHR program. So you basically have some government bureaucrats sitting around somewhere going, these are the features that should be in the EHR program of the future.
Yeah.
And then everyone has to implement exactly that, or their customers won't qualify. And if you go on the websites of the companies in that space, they have huge sections of their website dedicated to how you can qualify for this stuff. And so that's the exact opposite of what entrepreneurs do. The exact opposite.
And by the way, almost any doctor you talk to hates using these kinds of digital health records, and will make a very compelling argument about why it makes the practice of medicine worse, not better.
The story of electronic health records told by Bill and Malcolm is one in which the doctors are pursuing the money, not the real benefits of digital record keeping. The doctors who are pursuing only the money are playing a game of fauxchievement. Remember that the prototype is when students pursue grades or test scores instead of pursuing a proper understanding of the subject matter that they are being taught. Being offered a reward, money or grades, for behaving in a certain way, using electronic health records or taking a test, can be perceived as a crass manipulation by the person being offered the reward. It also turns out that some people become so enamored of the reward that they focus their participation on maximizing the reward and ignoring what was intended to be the focus, enhancing patient care through better record keeping or understanding the subject of study. Those gaming the system put so much focus on the reward that they actively defeat the purpose that offering the rewards was supposed to serve. To use Bill's words, it's an asinine approach. To recap what Bill and Malcolm were talking about, Bill, who frequently invests lots of money in technological fixes, was asked by Malcolm, isn't it possible that healthcare is an area of deeply important personal interaction that's not amenable to technological fixes? Bill's answer was essentially, if the technology enables the bureaucratic piece to melt away into the background, then that technology is ultimately improving those intimate personal interactions. Bill did not see any reason why using technologies that facilitate data collection and analysis would be incompatible with intimate personal interactions. He clearly accepted Malcolm's premise about the central importance of intimate personal interactions, but he rejected Malcolm's conclusion that the technology would inevitably interfere. They appear to agree that the technology is currently taking up too much of the foreground. Therefore, Bill is really suggesting that the challenge of technology is how to achieve the melting away that puts it firmly in the background. I'm sharing this snippet of their conversation with you because I believe that the exact same question is validly asked of educational technologies. I take it as a given that schools, like hospitals and doctors' offices, are meant to be places that facilitate deeply important personal interactions. I take it as obvious that the healthcare system needs to help patients to heal, and school systems need to help learners to learn. In order to accomplish those tasks effectively, they need to operate within the constraint that both the technological and the bureaucratic pieces must melt away into the background. When they take up too much of the foreground, those systems are hindering more than helping. My work focuses on getting education policy to explicitly recognize the very core of an effective school system is learning. Since teaching is not strictly necessary for learning, schools must operate more as a learning system than as an instructional delivery system. To be clear, I'm all for teachers because under the right circumstances they are very helpful. However, we need to be clear about which circumstances make teachers hindrances to learning and which circumstances make them helpful to learners. In the instance of doctoring, it has become clear over the last century and a half that one of the circumstances that is crucial to enabling doctors to be helpful is the explicit recognition of germ theory in the institutional policies of the healthcare system. According to medical historian David Wooten, in the 1800s, before germ theory was embedded in policy, the doctors were literally more harmful than helpful. Home was often safer than the hospital for having babies and recovering from many diseases because the very best hospitals in the world infected 40 to 80% of their patients, and the majority of infected patients died. The situation in hospitals has changed over the last century and a half, such that the infection rates are now about only 7%, and almost all the infected patients live. You're probably familiar with the litany of problems with K-12 schools. Achievement gaps, dropouts, bullying, suicides, reform fad of the week, bad teachers that schools can't get rid of, good teachers leaving the profession, etc., etc., etc. What if these are not the real problems, but just symptoms of a deeper problem? That deeper problem is disengagement. Right now, the current rates of disengagement for both teachers and students in K-12 schools are close to 70%. Since engagement is central to the deeper learning that is necessary for good citizenship today, the situation in schools is bad, but everyone already knew something was wrong because of that litany of symptoms we've all heard about. The disease causing those symptoms is disengagement. The situation of schools can be improved in the same way that hospitals were improved, by embedding a solid scientific theory in the policies that guide the system. In this case, a theory of learning. The theory that needs to be embedded in policy is the self-determination theory of motivation and engagement from psychology, specifically the primary human needs subtheory. It's not usually regarded as a theory of learning, but it turns out the research is clear that The ways that primary human needs affect motivation and engagement have huge impacts on learning. In fact, when primary human needs are not being satisfied, then it is impossible for deeper learning to happen. To put it another way, we need to update what it means to go back to basics. The old idea of back to basics was about the 3 R's, no nonsense in the classroom and strict discipline. Let's call that Back to Basics 1.0, which isn't exactly wrong, but 1.0 is about teaching, not learning. In my book, More Joy, More Genius, I propose that we update the idea of back to basics. Let's get serious about the basics of learning and change the system to conform to how learning actually works. Let's be clear about the circumstances that make teachers helpful and create a system for consistently creating those circumstances throughout the system. Back to Basics 2.0 is based on the science of self-determination theory, and it's about governance, engagement, and providing need support. Visit dladvocates.org to find out more about Back to Basics 2.0 and my book, More Joy, More Genius. Thanks for watching.